Hi, welcome back to Sodor Wet Wharf. I wanted to make this video to explain why I wanted to model, or at least attempt to model, Sodor Wet Wharf. What was it about this location, as opposed to any of the others, that drew me to it? And how are we going to actually model this? So, to begin with, look at this picture here that's on the screen. This is an amazing picture. There's so much going on. The main thing is we've got narrow gauge engines on here and standard gauge engines. So due to the fact that we now have commercially available narrow gauge engines for Thomas the Tank and standard double O gauge, we can have this layout looking amazing. We're going to have this with all full of engines, and I just really like the idea of having all my engines on one layout instead of building a narrow gauge section and a standard gauge section. So this is one of the few places where the tracks meet, but this one has got a lot of tracks on it, and I just think it's going to be a bit more interesting than anywhere else with what I've got and what I like. Also, it's quite flat. We've got no hills, we've got no bushes. I mean, trying to copy a tree, like a tree on the TV, I'm going to struggle. My trees may look reasonable once I've made them. They may look vaguely like a tree, but is it going to look the same as the one on a TV program? Probably not. Bushes the same, flowers, I'm going to really struggle to make them look anything like that. However, a 3D geometric shape is a lot easier to copy. As to how we're going to do this, now that is the hard thing. I love the look of the wharf. I mean, there's a lot of stuff online you can see. So we've got lovely, like, different pictures of where everything is, and we can try and figure out what's going on. This is quite an early concept picture that I found, and we get to see which buildings are where. Obviously, there were some changes, and even amongst this point, here, the best reference work that we have for what goes where, the narrow gauge point that's here is missing. I'll show you what I found. This is what basically made this possible, a blueprint. And you see we've got no point work here at all, but otherwise this seems to be pretty much spot on, apart from some of the buildings, but the track work seems pretty much spot on to what we see in the actual episodes. And not only is this a great picture because it's a blueprint face down, we can see exactly where things are in relation to everything else. We can just convert this onto a massive big board, plonk everything down. Now I actually tried this with a track layout software. Superimpose this and laid the track down, try and get an idea of how big each square was, but it wasn't very successful because I didn't know how big this was, and the track used on Thomas obviously is G scale, but the models are closer to O scale. So how do I convert this to double O? Now, it was quite hard. I had no idea until I found this. Now, this is the building that you can see here on the map on the bottom left. We have this building. It's a really great looking building, really interesting because this front end pops out and goes over the tracks. Now we can see how tall this is and how wide it is. We've even got a size in there of how big the actual model is, but that still doesn't help us to work out how big each square was on our map. So I added some little lines and worked out how tall each level or each floor of this building is. So we've got 5 squares per floor, and each floor of the building is normally 10 foot tall. So that would be each square is about 2 foot. However, that's not quite true because that would make this, it's 31 and a bit squares. It would make this about 63 foot wide, which would be quite a big building. But This is a commercial building. So floors of commercial buildings are normally 11 to 12 foot tall. So obviously they've got big machines in there sometimes, and a lot of stuff laying around. So they need to have high shelving for storing stuff. So that would actually make it bigger. And we still need to convert that to 00 scale so it fits in with everything else. And then going back to our picture here, we can see the building is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 3/4 squares. So if you can work out the size of that, divide it by the number of squares, we can work out how big each square is in real life, or 00 or real life. And well, the maths is quite simple, really. We just work out that 5 squares is 12 foot, and then we work out the width of that building based upon the size of each square, and then divide that by 7.75 to get the size of each square. Now, each square, if the building was 10 foot tall, which is unlikely because it's not residential, if each one was 10 foot, it'd be 3.19 centimeters per square. So just over 3 centimeters per square. Now, 11 foot, it'd be 3.5 centimeters per square. Or at 12 foot, it'd be 3.84 centimeters per square. And then it dawned on me after working out all this that we have here a bridge and 2 standard gauge tracks going across it. Now, 2 standard gauge tracks at narrow spacing, so the smallest, the smallest spacing that we can do on like point work, not on set track, but on like streamline track. We would need 10 centimeters for this bridge. And then I measured the bridge, and we have 1, 2.5. So the inside between these 2 walls of the bridge is therefore at 4 centimeters per square, 10 centimeters. So that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to do 4 centimeters per square. Now, I actually added all this up at 4 centimeters per square. We have 32 squares in height on this picture. So there'll be 96 centimeters. So we've got almost a foot there. Lengthwise, we have got 40 squares, so 160. Now, obviously, we can add a little bit to each side here, potentially. We can add stuff to the background, but there's nothing seen on the background or the foreground ever. But let's just see how big that is in feet. I worked it out in centimeters, 160 centimeters by 96 centimeters, which works out at 5 foot 2.9, so call it 5 foot 3 by 3 foot 8. And this is a good size for a model railway. Kind of almost 6 foot by almost 4 foot. A bit small. We definitely wouldn't have wanted to go to 3 centimeters. And if we look at this, we've actually got here the canal section at the front. This is 32 centimeters. So this is a full foot of our layout. We need this to be removable, and then I can reach the back without any problems. It will make it lighter, but it's still going to be quite heavy. So what we decided was we can have 4 sections. So we've got this really big one here. So this is 96 by 100 centimeters for the right hand island, and 48 by 96 for the island on the left. We'll have room to expand. There isn't much on the left hand side looking at any pictures. There's a couple of buildings here, but not much. And you don't get any close-ups of them anywhere that I can see. So we'll leave a little bit of a gap here. On the other side, the only time we see stuff here, what we see here is a dry wharf, but sideways on in one of the pictures from the behind the scenes. And obviously, or even ending one of the episodes, in fact, we see Dry Wharf on the right hand side. However, it's positioned in such a way that comparing the track layout of Dry Wharf and Wet Wharf, that the two cannot mix in the way that they're portrayed on set. They've basically put Dry Wharf there to give the background more variety. Also, we see that buildings come and go, which makes a lot of sense, creating a new shed for the engines, or a little kind of hut for the workers. You just reuse the ones you already had. There'd be no need to remake an engine shed for every single place where you're filming on. You can just go borrow one from somewhere else, maybe a quick bit of paint if it's not going to be used again, or put some accessories at the side of it, some ladders on, put some moss growing on the roof, and it can look like a completely different area. Turn it around, and we may never have seen a building back to front in one area, and it can be reused. So obviously, if things were going to change through filming, and buildings were going to get in the way of cameras, so they were going to have to be moved. Also, I'm going to just add a little bit more to this front here. As I said, it's 32 centimeters, so it's a foot wide, the canal, and I think that's just gigantic. When, you know, if we make it half that, we'd get all the boats in there. And I don't want to narrow it down too much because I want it to look good. But what I do want to do is just add enough. We do actually get the sides of the canal, you can see those. But I want to just add a little bit of room for a footpath. Bit of grass growing on there, maybe a duck or two walking along. A bit of greenery. I think that would be really good. And I just complete it. This section is going to be removable. I'll have a join under the bridge here, and then more water up here. The bridges, the three bridges that cross, 4 bridges, sorry, that cross the tracks, I'm going to have those removable. So we've got 4 sections and our bridges that are removable. And that is our goal. This is going to fit in my space that I need to use, and hopefully I've not bored anybody too much with this. The next video, I'm going to start to create one of these. Thank you for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel if you want to know what's happening next on this journey of recreating Sodor's Wet Wharf.